In this video, we're going to talk about variables and memory in Java. Before I get to the memory part of it, let me do an example with a few variables so that you can see just some of the basics, so you have something to keep in mind when I talk about the memory part. So what we're going to do is create a variable that we can keep a number in, and then print it out to the screen, and then we're going to change it and print it out again. So we're going to call this number x, and we're going to give it an initial value of 2. And then we're going to use our friend print line so we can see what it is. And I'll explain what this means later, but that's how you show a variable in print line. So we go ahead and run that. And x is 2. That's the value it was given when we created it. So let's go ahead and change it. We can do a little bit of math here because x is an integer, which is a number. So now we say x is equal to x plus 1. Now we're going to print it out again. And so what do you think x will be on the second print statement? 3. Which makes sense after we explain a little bit of stuff. So what we've done here is created a variable with a particular type. Now whenever you create a variable, you have to give it a type for reasons I'll explain in a few minutes. But this is how you do it. First you put the type, in this case int, and then you put the name, in this case x. You can give it an initial value, otherwise it gets set to sort of a default. It would just be 0. We set it to 2. And that's about it as far as creating a simple variable like that. The next thing we did was print it out, and we can just sort of wave our hands about this right now, but this plus right here doesn't have anything to do with math. That's telling Java to join these two components together, so to print the combination of this and then this value. Then in this next line, we say that x is equal to x plus 1, and what this means is to save in x the value of x plus 1. Now, if you were doing something like this in algebra, it wouldn't make any sense. You know, if you're solving a problem like x plus 1 equals 2 in algebra, you know, this equal sign means something different than that equal sign. Keep that in mind. In algebra, the equal sign means that the two values, that the left side and the right side are the same. You know, so from that you could deduce that this x is actually 1. The equal sign in a program in Java means to assign the value. It doesn't mean that they're equal. So don't get bogged down in that. What this line right here says is set x to whatever x currently is plus 1. So as you can see, after it runs, x is 1 more than it was before, and we print that value out right over here. So that's a very basic example of working with a variable. I want to explain what's going on behind the scenes a little bit here so that you can understand more complicated stuff. And to do that, I have to introduce this concept called memory. Now, when your program runs, it has access to memory. And As somebody who's been programming for a very long time, it's hard for me to even explain what memory is because I'm so used to just working with it. But you can really think about memory as a big warehouse. And when your program runs, it can use this warehouse just like you would use a warehouse in real life. And what you can do with that is you can put stuff into the warehouse, you can save it in there, you can take it out, you can move it from one place of the warehouse to another. You can copy stuff, put duplicates into the warehouse, you can remove it from the warehouse. But that's sort of a good mental model. And when you start thinking about variables, you can think about variables as boxes in the warehouse. So let me go back to this example code to explain how that might make sense. So the type in this example, int, you can think of that as describing what type of box we're going to store something in the warehouse. You may need a small box for some items, you may need a big box for other items. In this case, we have a box that's good at storing what are called integers. Now, another digression, integers are non-fractional numbers. You can store -1, 0, 1, 2, 3 in an int, but you can't store 1.5, 2.5, 1/10. The fractional part just gets cut off. So back to the warehouse though. We've told our program that we want a box of type int because we want to store a number, and then we've given it a name x, which is sort of like a reference to a particular box in the warehouse. So you might imagine that we want to store two numbers, and so we would say int y equals 10. So now we've got two boxes that are the same size, the same type, because they're both ints, but they're two unique ones. One is called x, one is called y. So we can go into our warehouse and we can say, give me x, give me y. We have to go into the warehouse to get it when we want to print out the value, for example. But Java takes care of all that stuff for you, but you just have to remember that when you want to store something in memory, you need a type, in these cases integers, and you need a name. So you can't have two variables with the same name. That wouldn't make sense. It's sort of like they would, you get an error if you try and do another one. See, NetBeans will make everything go red and scary, and that won't even run. So you can't have two things with the same name, but you can have two things with the same type, as you can see. So those are the basics of creating a variable and giving it a value and then showing it or printing it back out to the screen. There are a lot of different types besides ints, and we'll get to those in later videos. But for now, these are the very basics of creating a variable and understanding a little bit about what's happening in the background and what this thing called memory is.